Blood splattered across the white marble floor, a shocking streak against the polished perfection of Westbridge University's grand lobby. The janitor's mop slipped from her trembling hands as laughter echoed from behind her. 3 students, golden, privileged, untouchable, smirked like hunters circling prey. They had no idea who they were mocking. No idea that beneath her quiet eyes lay a storm forged in survival, in streets that taught her to fight or die. By the time they realized what she was capable of, it would already be too late. Subscribe to Racism Untold Stories, where the truth behind every injustice is finally revealed. Marlene Brooks began each morning before the sun had even dared to rise over Westbridge University. The air at that hour was cold, silent, and still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. She liked that feeling. In the silence, no one judged her. No one sneered, no one remembered that she was only the janitor. The path from the bus stop to the campus stretched across manicured lawns and towering buildings built from stone older than her grandmother's Bible. Marble pillars gleamed under security lights, and glass walls reflected a world of wealth and promise that seemed to exist for everyone but her. Each morning, she walked past the fountains that glittered like diamond veins and the bronze statues of donors who had built the school. Yet she knew the truth. It was not the donors who kept the university alive. It was people like her, the invisible ones who swept, scrubbed, polished and mended, the ones whose names no one ever learned. When Marlene reached the administration building, she used the side door, the one marked Staff Entrance Only. The main doors were not for her. They were for the students who would never notice the weight of her footsteps echoing below them. Inside, she clocked in, tied her gray apron tighter, and began her routine. Her mop bucket squeaked faintly as it rolled across the tile floors, leaving behind long trails of clean water that reflected the flickering fluorescent lights. The scent of lemon cleaner hung heavy in the air, sharp and sterile. Marlene worked with precision. Every stroke of the mop, every polished doorknob, every window wiped free of smudges was part of her rhythm. The quiet repetition gave her peace, a sense of control in a world that often seemed determined to remind her of what she was not. She had been working at Westbridge for 6 years. Before that, she had cleaned hospitals, schools, and restaurants. None of those jobs had felt quite as heavy as this one. Not because of the work itself, she was no stranger to labor, but because of the eyes, the students' eyes. They were young, beautiful, and careless. They came from families who owned businesses, who sent donations, who carried names carved into the stone walls around her. Their laughter carried arrogance. Their glances slid over her like she was part of the furniture. They never thought about what it meant to clean up after them. But Marlene did not despise them. She pitied them, because they did not understand what it meant to fight for existence. Every evening after her shift, she would stop by the small cafe near the bus stop. She would order the cheapest item on the menu, a cup of black coffee, and sit by the window, watching the students laugh as they passed. She wondered sometimes how different her life might have been if she had been given the same chances. But regret was a luxury she could not afford. At 53 years old, Marlene had long accepted her place in the world, or at least she told herself she had. But deep inside her chest, behind the years of restraint and humility, something else lived, a sleeping force. A pulse that once defined her, before the uniform, before the mop, before the invisibility. There had been a time when the crowd roared her name, when the thud of fists meeting gloves was the rhythm of her life, when the air around her vibrated with power and danger. They had called her the Iron Widow. She had fought in underground rings in Detroit and Chicago, where the crowd was ruthless and the stakes were survival. Her body had been her weapon, her shield, her proof that she could not be broken. She had been fierce, undefeated, and feared, a name that made even men hesitate before stepping into the ring. But that life had vanished the night her younger brother Darius was killed in a robbery gone wrong. He had been 17. He had come to one of her matches to surprise her, but instead he had walked into the wrong alley afterward, an alley where someone's desperation met someone else's gun. The guilt had destroyed her. Marlene had not fought again after that night. She had packed away her gloves, buried them deep in a box she never opened, and promised herself she would never raise her fists again. Violence had taken everything from her. She would not let it define her. When she came to Westbridge University, she wanted peace. She wanted quiet. She wanted to exist without fighting. For years, that peace held steady, until the day she met them, the trio. 3 students whose laughter sliced through the air like a blade. The first was Liam, the son of a senator. He carried himself like a man born to command, his smirk always a little too sharp. The second was Ethan, tall and broad-shouldered, a college athlete who treated the world as his personal arena. The third was Ava, a business major with a perfect smile and eyes that hid cruelty behind charm. Together, they moved like royalty, leaving a trail of noise and entitlement wherever they went. Marlene noticed them long before they noticed her. She had seen their names in the student bulletin, heard their laughter echo through the halls. They were untouchable, the kind of people who believed the rules did not apply to them. The first time they crossed paths was in the student lounge after a late-night party. The room was a wreck, empty bottles, confetti, and half-eaten food everywhere. Marlene sighed softly and began to clean. As she bent down to gather the trash, the trio entered, still laughing from the night's festivities. The scent of expensive cologne and champagne filled the air. She felt their eyes on her but ignored them. She had dealt with worse. Then she heard a whisper. "Can you believe she works here?" one of them said. "Probably gets paid more than she deserves," another voice replied, dripping with mockery. They laughed. Marlene kept her gaze low, focusing on the trash bag in her hands. But every word landed like a stone. Not because it was new. She had heard things like that all her life. But because of the ease with which they said it, as if her humanity were a joke. When she turned to move her bucket, someone deliberately kicked over a soda can near her feet. "You missed a spot," Liam said lazily, his voice cold with superiority. Marlene did not respond. Her silence only seemed to amuse them more. They laughed again, louder this time. She picked up the can, dropped it in the trash, and continued cleaning. But for the first time in years, her hands trembled slightly. There had been a spark, small but dangerous, flickering beneath her calm. The moment passed, and they left, their laughter echoing down the hallway. When the doors closed, Marlene stood in the empty lounge, breathing deeply. Her reflection in the glass window stared back, older, tired but unbroken. She pressed her palms together, the same way she used to before stepping into the ring. Old habits never truly died. That night, as she walked home beneath the streetlights, she thought about Darius. She thought about strength, about silence, about what people like those students would never understand. That there was power in restraint, but also danger in assuming restraint meant weakness. In her small apartment, she placed her hands on the box under her bed, the one she had not opened in years. Inside it were her gloves, worn, cracked, but still strong. She ran her fingers across them, then closed the lid again. The trio did not know it yet, but they had already awakened something they could not control. The world at Westbridge University would soon learn that even the quietest soul can carry the strength of a storm. The days that followed unfolded with a slow, simmering tension that no one but Marlene Brooks could feel. She moved through her shifts as she always did, calm, quiet, methodical. But something in the air had shifted. The trio seemed to sense it too, though not in the way that warned them of danger. To them it was amusement, a game. It began with whispers. When Marlene entered a hallway, laughter followed her. When she mopped near the student cafe, She caught glimpses of smirks and heard fragments of mockery. "There goes the cleaning queen," someone said once. Another time, a paper cup rolled to her feet with the word "maid" scribbled on it in bold black ink. Marlene never responded. She simply bent down, picked up the cup, and continued working. Her silence was her armor, and she wore it like steel. But every cruel act chipped away at something deep within her, something that had slept for too long. The trio grew bolder. They had tasted the power of humiliation and wanted more. They began to linger wherever she worked, outside classrooms, near the administrative offices, or in the courtyard where she emptied trash bins. Their presence carried the weight of mockery, the kind that only privilege could afford. Liam, the ringleader, took special pleasure in it. He would walk past her with exaggerated politeness, tipping an invisible hat and saying, "Careful there, do not slip." His friends laughed every time. One afternoon, as she mopped the floor near the main library, they appeared again. This time, Ethan was holding a sports drink. He pretended to trip, spilling it across the floor she had just cleaned. The bright blue liquid spread like a stain across her hard work. Marlene froze. Her mop handle tightened in her grip. For a brief moment, she saw not the university hallway, but a ring, a crowd, the glint of lights, the sound of blood hitting the floor. Then she blinked and the vision faded. "Guess you missed a spot," Ethan said, smirking. Ava giggled and whispered something that made Liam laugh harder. Marlene did not move for several seconds. Then she knelt, slowly, deliberately, and began to clean again. Her movements were careful, controlled, the same kind of control she had once used to keep her fists steady during a fight. They mistook her silence for fear. That was their mistake. In the staff break room, the other janitors talked about it. They had seen the trio's behavior and shook their heads, but they were afraid to intervene. The university had rules that protected the powerful. "You need to let it go, Marlene," said Clara, an older woman who had worked there for decades. "They are rich kids. They are not worth losing your job over." Marlene nodded silently, but deep inside, a voice whispered that this was not about a job. It was about something larger, the line between humility and humiliation. She went home that night, her mind restless. She looked again at the box beneath her bed. She did not open it this time, but her fingers hovered over it longer than usual. The gloves inside called to her, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of who she had been before the world decided what she was allowed to be. The next morning, when she arrived at Westbridge, the air felt heavier. Rain had fallen overnight, and the campus gleamed under a pale gray sky. Students hurried to classes under umbrellas while she began her shift with quiet focus. By mid-morning, she was assigned to clean the Dean S. Hall, a grand chamber used for banquets and official ceremonies. The marble floor shone like a mirror, and the chandeliers above glittered like frozen fire. The hall was empty when she began, her mop gliding across the marble with rhythmic grace. But peace, as always, was temporary. The door burst open with laughter. Liam, Ethan, and Ava stumbled in, voices loud and slurred. It was early for drinking, but they were not the kind to care. They had been celebrating a fraternity event and were looking for entertainment. When their eyes found her, smiles spread across their faces. "Well, look who is here," Liam said, his tone sharp with mock cheerfulness. "The Queen of Clean." Ava leaned against the wall, watching with predatory amusement. "Do you think she ever gets tired of it?" she said softly. "Always on her knees, always scrubbing." Ethan laughed, tossing an empty cup toward her bucket. It missed and rolled to her feet. Marlene did not speak. She did not look up. Her mop continued its steady motion, the rhythm unbroken. But inside, her heart was no longer calm. It beat with the slow, steady thud of something ancient and rising, the sound of a fighter's pulse before the first round. Liam took a step closer. "Hey," he said, his tone sharpening. We are talking to you. She did not respond. The silence infuriated him. He picked up her mop bucket and tipped it over, spilling dirty water across the floor. The water spread beneath his shoes, soaking the hem of his expensive pants. The others laughed. For a long moment, Marlene said nothing. The room seemed to freeze. The dripping sound of the mop water, the only noise in the vast marble space. Then she slowly straightened. Her movements were measured, graceful, precise. She wiped her hands on her apron, then folded them in front of her. Her eyes lifted, finally meeting his. The calm in her expression unsettled him. There was no fear there, no anger, no weakness, only something unreadable. Liam took another step forward, his smirk faltering slightly. What? You think you can stare at me like that? Marlene remained still. Her silence had become heavier than words. Ethan moved beside Liam, his grin returning. She is not going to do anything, he said. She is too scared. Look at her. He reached out as if to push her shoulder. That was the moment her restraint cracked. It was not rage, it was instinct. The same instinct that had saved her life countless times before. In that instant, every year of discipline, every lesson drilled into her muscles, every fight she had ever survived, all of it came rushing back. The sound of her heartbeat filled her ears like a drum. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. She stepped back, shifting her weight to her right leg. Her eyes did not blink. Her breath slowed. Ethan's hand moved closer, arrogance in every motion. And in that moment, Marlene Brooks, the invisible janitor, the forgotten worker, the quiet shadow of Westbridge University, was gone. In her place stood the Iron Widow. She had not chosen violence, but it had chosen her. Her body moved before her thoughts could catch up. A lifetime of control had kept her fists still, but now, the same control would decide exactly how the next moments unfolded. The marble floor beneath them would remember the sound, the university would remember the sight, and the world would finally see the strength they had mocked for far too long. The world seemed to hold its breath. The marble floor gleamed beneath the chandelier, reflecting the three privileged faces twisted with mockery, faces that had never known consequence. For a single heartbeat, time stretched thin, like the fragile silence before a storm. Ethan's hand reached for Marlene's shoulder, arrogance radiating from his grin. He expected flinching, retreat, the submission of someone beneath him. Instead, he met something he had never encountered before. Immovable calm. Marlene Brooks did not step back. She moved forward. Her motion was fluid, precise, silent. She turned her wrist just enough to redirect his force. His balance faltered instantly. Before his mind could register what had happened, she shifted her stance and swept her leg behind his. His body slammed against the marble floor with a hollow echo that rolled through the grand hall like thunder. The laughter stopped. Liam blinked, disbelief written across his face. Ava gasped, her painted nails trembling around the phone she held loosely at her side. Marlene stood over Ethan's sprawled form. Her face was calm, her breathing steady. She had not moved in anger, only in defense, with the instinct of someone who had once survived through precision and control. Ethan groaned, clutching his wrist. He tried to rise, but Marlene's voice, low, quiet, and firm, stopped him. Do not. It was the first word she had spoken to them. The sound of it carried power. Liam's shock turned to rage. His ego could not process what he was seeing. That a janitor, a woman he had humiliated, had just floored his friend in seconds. His jaw tightened. You think that makes you powerful? He snapped, stepping forward. You are going to regret that. Marlene's gaze lifted to meet his, unflinching. Her silence enraged him further. He charged forward, his hand raised, his arrogance blinding him to reality. She waited until the last possible moment, her body coiled like a spring. Then she sidestepped effortlessly. His momentum betrayed him. With the smallest twist of her hips, she redirected his weight. His own force sent him crashing into one of the chairs lined along the wall. The wood splintered beneath him, the sound sharp and final. Ava screamed. The chandelier light flickered against the marble as the chaos of movement and disbelief filled the room. Marlene did not chase. She stood perfectly still, her shadow long and commanding beneath the golden glow. It was not fury in her eyes. It was mastery. The control of someone who had been to the edge of violence and learned to own it, not be consumed by it. Liam struggled to his feet, panting, his pride shattered. His friends stared at him, waiting for his next move, but something inside him broke too. Not physically, but in the silent recognition of defeat. He had been beaten not by strength, but by discipline. Ethan, still groaning on the floor, spat out a curse and tried to stand. "You are dead," he hissed, pointing a trembling finger. "You are going to lose your job for this." Marlene looked at him without a word. He pulled out his phone, opening the camera as if to capture evidence that would destroy her. But before he could speak another word, the heavy doors of the dean's hall swung open. Security guards entered, drawn by the noise and Ava's panicked screams. Their radios crackled as they took in the scene. 2 students disheveled, 1 injured, and a janitor standing silent amid the chaos. At first, the guards assumed what privilege always assumes, that the woman in the uniform must be at fault. They moved toward her, but Ava's voice, shrill and desperate, interrupted their certainty. "She attacked them!" Ava cried. "She went crazy!" Liam seized the opportunity. "She just snapped," he said quickly, trying to reclaim control of the story. "We were talking and she threw Ethan to the floor." The guards turned to Marlene. Her face was unreadable. She did not protest. She simply said, "Check the cameras." Her tone was steady, almost detached. The guards paused, exchanging uncertain looks. One of them spoke into his radio. Within minutes, the dean himself arrived, an older man with silver hair and a reputation for diplomacy. His face tightened as he surveyed the scene. "What is going on here?" he demanded. The students began to speak at once, their voices tripping over each other in a frenzy of half-truths. But the dean silenced them with a raised hand. "Enough," he said coldly. "We will review the security footage. No one leaves." They all waited as one of the guards accessed the footage from the hallway cameras that captured the entire event. The truth unfolded on the large screen in stark, unflinching detail. Every insult, every shove, every cruel laugh, every deliberate act of humiliation. It was all there, the slow degradation of a woman who had asked for nothing but respect. And then, finally, the moment they touched her. The moment she defended herself with the precision of a professional fighter. There was no aggression, only discipline. No attack, only response. The silence in the hall grew suffocating. Liam's face drained of color. Ethan looked at the ground, his bravado melting into shame. Ava covered her mouth with trembling fingers, her eyes wide as she watched herself laughing in the background of the recording. When the footage ended, no one spoke. The dean's eyes turned to Marlene. There was a quiet respect in them now, the kind that comes when truth slices through comfort. "Ms. Brooks," he said slowly, "I am deeply sorry for what you have endured." Marlene inclined her head, her expression calm, though her heart still thudded heavily within her chest. The dean's tone hardened as he turned to the students. "You 3 will report to my office immediately. Your behavior is disgraceful, and the university will not tolerate it. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending review for expulsion." Liam tried to protest, but the words died in his throat. Security escorted them out, their heads low, their laughter silenced. For the first time in years, the halls of Westbridge felt quiet. Not the empty kind of quiet that came from neglect, but the sacred kind that follows revelation. Marlene stood alone in the grand hall. The spilled water still glistened on the floor, reflecting her silhouette like a mirror. She took a slow breath, the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. She had not wanted this confrontation, but it had found her anyway. She knelt once more, her hands steady, and began to mop the floor. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. The motion was symbolic, the cleansing of something larger than dirt. When the dean approached again, he said softly, "You could press charges if you wish." Marlene shook her head. "No, the truth is enough." Her voice carried through the empty hall, steady as stone. The dean watched her for a long moment before he nodded respectfully. "Then let us make sure no one ever forgets it." And he left her there, the quiet guardian of dignity, surrounded by gleaming marble and echoes of justice, finally served. For the first time in a long while, Marlene felt peace. Not the fragile peace of silence, but the kind born from standing firm when others tried to erase your worth. In that moment, Westbridge University did not see a janitor. It saw strength. It saw resilience. It saw the fighter who had never truly disappeared, only waited for the world to remember her name. The following days at Westbridge University unfolded like the slow turn of a tide. The air, once filled with careless laughter and invisible cruelty, carried a different kind of silence, heavy, reflective, watchful. Word of what had happened in the dean's hall spread faster than wildfire. The video had leaked, shared first by a janitor who had access to the internal security system, then by students who could not believe what they had seen. It was everywhere within 24 hours. Social media exploded. Headlines read, "University Janitor Defends Herself Against Students, Racist Attack," and "Hidden Camera Footage Exposes Class and Racial Divide at Elite School." Marlene Brooks became an unwilling symbol. Her face, once overlooked in every corridor, now filled phone screens, news articles, and online debates. Some called her a hero, others called her dangerous, but she did not care for either word. She had never sought attention. She had only wanted to do her work in peace. When she arrived for her next shift, whispers followed her. Not the cruel kind, but the reverent kind. Students stepped aside when she passed. Some nodded respectfully. Others could not meet her eyes, ashamed of how easily they had once ignored her. The same halls that had once made her feel invisible now seemed to bow in quiet apology. In the staff room, her co-workers gathered around her, their faces alight with pride. Clara, the elderly janitor who had once told her to stay quiet, hugged her tightly. "You made us all proud," she said with tears in her eyes. "You showed them who we really are." Marlene smiled faintly. "I showed them who they could be," she replied softly. She worked through the day as she always did, but there was something different in the way her mop moved. Slower, more deliberate, almost ceremonial. Every motion felt like a cleansing not just of floors, but of years of quiet injustice. Later that week, the dean asked to see her again. She entered his office, a large space lined with shelves of leather-bound books and framed awards. He rose from his desk when she entered. There was no condescension in his tone, only sincerity. "Ms. Brooks," he began, "the board has reviewed the incident. The students involved have been expelled permanently. Their families tried to appeal, but the evidence speaks too clearly." Marlene nodded. She had expected as much, but her face showed no satisfaction. She did not want vengeance. She wanted growth. The dean continued. "The university would like to offer you a promotion. A supervisory position for campus maintenance, higher pay, and full benefits. You deserve far more than what you have been given." For a moment she said nothing. Then she spoke quietly. "I appreciate it, sir, but what I want more is something that will outlast me." The dean frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I want a scholarship," she said, "for students who come from places like mine. Students who clean floors, who work nights, who cannot afford to dream in buildings like these. Let them rise. That is how we fix what broke here." The dean studied her for a long moment before nodding. "You will have it. The Marlene Brooks Scholarship Fund. Consider it done." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Then that is enough." When she left the office, the sunlight through the tall windows caught her face, and for the first time in years, she felt the warmth reach all the way inside her. The following month, the scholarship was announced publicly. It was named in her honor, as she had requested. The story appeared on national news networks. Interviews poured in, but Marlene turned them all down. She did not want fame. She wanted change. Reporters camped outside her apartment for days, eager to capture her story, but she slipped through the noise with quiet grace. Her life had already been loud enough in other ways. At the university, students began holding open forums on racism and class inequality. Professors integrated discussions about privilege and dignity into their lectures. Small acts of awareness began to ripple outward. Students cleaning their own messes, thanking staff members, listening more closely to the voices they had ignored. The transformation was not instant, but it was real. And it began with one moment of truth in a marble hall. On a quiet evening, Marlene walked through the empty campus alone. The autumn air was crisp, filled with the faint scent of fallen leaves. The sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and violet. She paused at the fountain in the center of the courtyard, the one she had walked past every morning for years without looking up. Now she looked. The water caught the light like liquid fire, and for the first time, she saw beauty instead of distance. She saw belonging. Her reflection stared back, older, lined with years of labor, but fierce and alive. Behind her eyes, the fighter still lived, no longer buried, but at peace. She thought of Darius, her brother, and the promise she had made after his death, never to fight again. She realized now that she had kept that promise. What she had done in the Dean's Hall was not violence. It was truth. She had not fought to harm, but to protect. And maybe, she thought, that was what real strength looked like. Not fists raised in anger, but dignity that refuses to kneel. She turned to leave when she heard footsteps behind her. A young woman approached, clutching a stack of books to her chest. Her voice was hesitant. "Miss Brooks?" Marlene turned. The girl looked nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you. I was accepted for the scholarship. I am the first in my family to go to college. I would not be here if not for you." Marlene smiled gently. "Do not thank me. Just promise you will help someone else when it is your turn." The girl nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. When she walked away, Marlene looked up at the darkening sky, the first stars beginning to appear. She whispered a quiet prayer, not of sorrow, but of gratitude, for survival, for strength, for purpose. The world around her had not changed entirely, but she had planted something that would grow long after she was gone. And that was enough. That night, as she locked the janitor's closet for the last time before transferring to her new position, she glanced once more at the empty corridor she had cleaned countless times. The tiles gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Her reflection looked back at her, calm and unbroken. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, "Still standing." And she was. Marlene Brooks, once invisible, once forgotten, had become the living proof that silence does not mean surrender, that humility does not mean weakness, and that even those whom society overlooks can ignite revolutions in the quietest ways. Sometimes the ones we ignore are the ones who carry the strength to change us all. Would you have treated her differently? Subscribe to Racism Untold Stories, where every story unveils hidden truths, challenges prejudice, and reminds the world that dignity, respect, and justice belong to everyone.